Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Code Remix Weekly. We're your regular hosts, Sam and Tim. That's Tim. I'm Sam. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well, doing well. How are you?
I'm glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. I'm also doing well. I have joined you in using Linux on my desktop. Got a new computer. My old computer had a my personal computer had a hardware problem that was causing it to just like hard crash, power off, would not power back on until I like reached behind and toggled off the power supply and toggled that back on. So like power button not working. And I'm like, well, that's probably a hardware problem of some kind, but is it the motherboard, the power supply? Like it happens mostly when I play games. Is it the GPU? So I decided to shell out for a whole new computer. It's time for an upgrade
Mm-hmm.
anyway, and I went with just an Ubuntu installation, and so far that has been interesting. There were a few little bumps at the beginning. My mouse didn't work. I got one of these MMO
Yep.
style mice that apparently has quite a unique protocol for communicating with the computer. So thanks Logitech. So initially the mouse didn't work, but my drawing tablet did for doing paintings and illustrations. So I was there,
That's,
using a stylus to navigate around until I could figure out how to remap the input. Now I mostly have things working well, although it's a new model of motherboard that OpenRGB doesn't like support yet for tuning all the RGB lights, which at their factory
yep.
defaults are at a blazing fast rainbow pattern constantly, like a little rave is going on inside my computer. But other than that, it's been honestly not that different from Windows.
It does give a bit of color to your late evening working hours, I imagine. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, so that's been kind of fun. It was nice to see how easy it was to set up a development environment. It's much more annoying to
Yeah.
set up Git
Yeah.
Bash and install the Linux or Unix style tools on Windows or WSL. It's just like, oh, it's just so easy. I just apt Git, a few things, and like I'm ready, I'm good to go. Wow, how nice
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes
So
you not quite want to go back. It's, the only downside is we now have one fewer person to be able to fix all those unit tests that don't quite work on Windows.
I do still have my Windows work laptop that I will try to be sure to use for time to time for open source development. So we find out, but
Hmm.
yeah, I am. It does mean it is now time for me to customize my console with a nice terminal emulator and make a choice
Yep.
between like
Yeah.
Bash or ZSH, which gave me an idea. Maybe for a future Code Remix weekly topic, particularly if we have like a chill week, we could just have everyone come on and just like show us your terminal. We're all programmers here. How do you like to configure your terminal? You got cool shortcuts or tmux, or what's
Yeah.
your what's your development your keyboard tech?
I'd be curious to hear. I mean, in my case, I like the plain defaults, as in I like my system. Like if I tweak it too much, I'll be annoyed when I can't ever get it back to that state when you
Yeah, I've,
reinstall.
I've 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 had that experience. I used the ZSH with Oh My ZSH once on WSL and found that made for a pretty terminal, and
Yep.
I liked the look of that. But I don't know if I'll do that again. I feel like I'm going to go collect ideas. But yeah, right now I'm choosing the default GNOME terminal. Anyway, look forward to getting more tips for just life on the Linux desktop from you, Tim, at some point. But for now, we should probably get into our news and announcements.
Absolutely,
What do we got
absolutely.
going on this week?
We have a couple of small things that we can announce. One is that we did a new patch release. Folks that follow us, they know we do a big release every 2 weeks, but we did a patch release which also contained some 30 changes, because we wanted to be sure that we can vet these ones before going into next week. There's a couple of changes in there, how we select Java versions when you have multiple on a class path, things like that. So shouldn't affect you too much. If you want to test drive these, then feel free to do so. And of course, there is the odd bit of fixes in there for various parsers, as well as some new recipes as well. So that's out there. Also out there is that we have a new blog where we are going deeper into the new dev center that we have. So this is a feature of the Moderne platform as well as the Moderne CLI. And what we have now refreshed is the way that we represent how far along you are with your upgrades. So as you can see from the screenshot here, we now have a very nice Parliament view where you can see representatives of these services that you have and where they fall into their adoption of Spring Boot 3.5, Java 25, and JUnit 6. And the nice thing here is that it is that nice representative view where with a pie chart it was kind of hard to tell, which we had previously. And this blog goes in depth about how we've set that up, how you can customize it and really make it your own. And you can also generate these insights locally, which could also be very interesting, especially when you're starting out with the Moderne CLI. So be sure to check that out, all available on the Moderne blog. Now, if you're not the type to read blogs, but you are the type to watch videos, then we also have a video on the exact same topic. So that is also out on YouTube. If you're already watching there, just click on that one next when done. And that's, I think, it in terms of the updates that we have for this week. So we do have a good friend of ours coming up on next week's episode, where Charlotte will be joining us and in conversation with you, Sam, because unfortunately I'll be out at Devox in Belgium. But I really look forward to the conversation there about all that's new in Java 25 and beyond.
Yeah, that should be fun, and I think it will make a nice conclusion for last week's stream, which we had talked about doing Java versus Kotlin, but ended up mostly being about Kotlin, and I feel like we didn't give Java's response to Kotlin language features the place that we kind of promised with that title. So it'll be excellent to be able to finish that conversation, or at least continue
absolutely. Yeah, and I'm still eyeing some more features we can add and recipes we can target specifically for Java 25. And I think we're nearly there. There's 2 or 3 more that I have my eye on. But mostly you can already try these out and run your upgrades and run them again next month when we add the additional ones still. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. And so I think that brings us to our guest for the week. Matt Campbell is a solutions engineer on our customer success team who's been doing modernization work for a very long time. So we're gonna have him on to discuss just fun stories that battle scars from the industry of all the interesting things we've seen and how organizations have navigated the thorny thicket of software modernization and keeping up to date. So yeah, let's welcome Matt Campbell. How you doing, Matt?
Hey guys, pretty good. How are you?
Good to be here. Your background is just so white. Like if you didn't have these like records in on the side showing like a hint of life and personality, I would think that you were in like a cell or an inpatient facility or or maybe a brand new apartment. So like would a colorful poster kill you?
Well, so I'm in my basement. So I suppose when you say I'm in a cell, it's a little bit.
Not actually that far off, huh?
Yeah, right.
I guess you can't put much on the wall behind you because those are like doors to a closet or something.
Yeah, this is all sort of built-in storage and stuff. So I have moved all over this house in the years since COVID forced us to be working from home. So I'm sure all of us have been in that place. But I've also we've had two kids since then. So every room that you think you've settled into, all of a sudden you're like, oh no, we need that for a bedroom. And so we're like, so here I am. Yeah. We're not going to put a kid in the basement, so I suppose I'm safe.
Well, I'm glad you found a space for yourself, and it is nice to have the colorful records providing a hint of humanity for the room.
Yeah. It's,
what do you have on the turnstile there? It's a bright yellow record, so it's kind of eye catching.
Yeah. So right now I've been doing a lot of listening to a post-hardcore band called Moving Mountains. This is their latest one, Pruning the Lower Limbs. This is actually their previous one before that. Very good.
Nice.
I was joking with a friend that like I find that like everyone, my favorite music is like when I was 20. Apparently, that's just a thing.
Sure.
And I'm living in this like golden age, right? Because I am that lines up perfectly with everyone's like 20th anniversary. Let me like, relive the glory days. So like I'm like buying records left and right, things that I listened to when I was 20. That was great. That's great.
Yeah, my partner Genevieve also got a record player. We have mostly been using it for. Um, she's excited about the new Ghosts of Yote game, about being
Hmm.
an assassin in feudal Japan, fighting bad guys, or maybe being a bad guy, a little unclear. But it has beautiful visuals and music. So we've been
Yeah.
listening to the soundtrack to Ghost of Tsushima and the soundtrack to the Dune movies.
Which is
A
great.
Hans Zimmer score, very
Yeah.
epic. Sometimes feels a little too epic for a living room, like these big sounds
Yeah.
and like, oh, like something important is happening. Like, what's going on? Oh, nothing. The cat's sitting on the couch. Okay, like
Yeah.
a little bit
Oh,
incongruous with the
yes.
grandeur of the music,
I
but
love it.
fun to listen to all the same.
Yep. Big fan
So
of listening to soundtracks. It's
Yeah.
lots of fun.
totally, totally. Yeah, personally, I think one of the soundtracks I've listened to the most is from Supergiant's Hades, where
Hmm.
composer Darren Korb, he knows how to rock out, man. Like I've played a decent amount of that game, but I've spent even more time just listening to the soundtrack. I find it's
Yeah.
one of my like most productive like soundtracks to code to. I don't know how that happened, but it just like I
Yep.
don't know, has like the right BPM or something to match my typing tempo,
There's got to be some
perhaps.
science to it. Yeah.
There's
Yep.
got to be. There's
I get
got
it.
to be. So speaking of of trying to find a good transition to something on topic, what is you're here to talk about migrations
Mm.
and modernization work throughout the industry. Give me like a brief overview. What are like some of
Mhm.
the kinds of projects that you've worked on throughout your career?
No, it's sort of all over the place, I'd say. So before I joined Moderne, right, I worked with folks that were, from a services perspective, just responsible for helping teams do that work, right? I've done it for my own teams, whether that's a Java upgrade or a Spring Boot upgrade. I think we
Hmm.
talk a
Hmm.
lot about those kind of framework upgrades and making sure that we're staying up to date here.
Totally.
Um, but you're also dealing with stuff like enterprises that sit on maybe a giant e-commerce like vendor system, and they want to
Yeah.
move to something leaner that's easier for them to release, or maybe it's cheaper for them, maybe they're trying to
Tech,
save some.
tech stack liquidity we sometimes
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
I
is
love
your
it.
Is your is
I
your
love
old
it.
vendor raising the prices 100x this coming year,
Yep.
or do you just want the new feature that the competing framework has?
Yep. Yeah. So you've got stuff like that. You've got stuff like, a lot of folks in the last 10, 15 years are driven by, uh, I want to move on-prem to the cloud. I've signed some
Yeah.
big deal and I want to take advantage of one of the hyperscalers.
Hmm.
Um, and then just more generally, you've got folks, developers like us that are sort of pushing to say, hey, I I want to be more cloud native. I want to be able to leverage all these cool technologies out there that help, from a resilience perspective or a performance perspective or just building features faster perspective. But they can't because they're sort of stuck in this like, to that
Quagmire.
mid 2000s, like my beautiful records, right? It's like they're still
Although
living
that
in
that the
the
records are
glory
by
days.
choice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'd rather be stuck in the records from 20 years ago than the code from 20 years ago, honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
So yeah.
do you have a? Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, it works through in unexpected ways. I mean, I've in the past been a consultant, and if you get offered an opportunity to work with Java 6 again, I might not take it. Whereas
Oh,
if you get the opportunity to work with the latest and
yeah,
greatest, you're more inclined to do so. And so it also filters out in the talent you can get in the door and keep in the door as well.
that
That's
is
true.
true. Yeah, the people aspect of like how you take advantage of the skills that you've already got, right? You've invested a lot in the people that are in your organization. How do I make sure that they are able to do the best work they can? But then how do I bring in new stuff, new blood, right? New talent. Folks that are coming out of college today are not learning Java 8,
Yeah.
right? They're
Yeah.
learning Kotlin or they're learning Java 25,
Hmm.
21. And
Hmm.
so it's really hard for folks to come into an environment that they sort of perceive already as sort of behind the curve. So
Yeah, I've had the experience of joining a company, not this one, and being like expecting everything to be like all cutting edge, and then finding out that like the source control system was Perforce. It wasn't even Git or something.
no.
It was after. It was when I worked at Microsoft. Windows was built on a fork of Perforce. I forget what they called it. They've since moved over to Git and done a lot of engineering work to make Git scale to mono repos of that size, which is
Hmm.
interesting in its own right. Um, but I was like, okay, cool. I'm moving into this new company. We're going to use it's a smaller, more dynamic company. They're going to use the latest and greatest of everything, and it was yeah, and it was just Perforce again. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
The source control system is a small thing for the most part, but it took the shine off just a little bit, you know.
Yep.
I feel like we're sort of in this weird arms race though, where people, you have this tension between shipping new features
Hmm.
and doing the work of, oh,
Oh,
I
absolutely.
want to upgrade the latest Spring Boot, or I want to move off of this big thing and you know maybe use something more modern. And so there's always this like push and pull of we only have so many hours in the day, we
Yeah,
only have so many folks that can do this stuff, and there's a lot of times it feels like there's a lot of risk in
sure,
uh, you know I want to fix this thing for my team, but it's just a drop in the bucket for an enterprise that is, not really paying attention to that. So
totally.
it's a
So
tough
do you have
thing.
any fun horror stories, either of an event or crisis which precipitated an investment, or challenges you ran into during such an investment to modernize?
Mm.
You got give us a story that has some
Yeah.
drama, maybe a
Ah,
villain of some kind.
all right. Huh. So,
Villain
I was
optional.
thinking,
Usually people are
yeah.
well intentioned, but if you do have one with a villain
uh,
that's going to be make for
well,
a great story, let's do that one.
let's frame a technology as a little villainous. Maybe not.
Very that's very diplomatic.
Yeah,
Probably
right.
smart not to choose a person.
So one of my favorite interesting stories here, right, is working with a company that was trying to move off of a monolithic Perl application.
Hmm.
Like, so this application was built
Hmm.
entirely using, CGI scripts and all these things.
Yeah.
And so they were finding, probably not unlike a lot of folks now, where they're looking at their COBOL or they're looking at
Hmm.
even, old Java and things like that, where they're like, I don't think I understand why these decisions were made. I don't know what this thing
Totally.
is doing, but I don't really know if it's safe to change.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that crippling sense of like I don't know, what
Yeah.
I'm allowed to
I
touch
don't
is one of the
understand the
reasons.
intent of the old code, and this
Yeah.
is this is something that I feel very strongly about when commenting code. And coding agents, as much as I've come to love them, like Claude, do the opposite of this when they leave comments. But the comment shouldn't describe what the code does; it should describe the intent, or the
Mm.
design decisions. Like, explain the reason the code is the way
Yep.
it is, and like trust the reader to be able to read and understand what it does. Like, that
Mhm.
is manifestly evident in the behavior of the system. Uh, yeah, yeah, exactly. Chesterton's fence. So yeah, when you have code that isn't commented with statements of intent or what design problems they were grappling with at the time, it's like, well, do I change it and just hope for the best? Like, literally, maybe no one knows why it is the way it
Yeah.
is, just that it is.
Yep. And I think to some degree, right, to Kevin's comment, like we can get a lot of value from we can help move forward without having to say, let's change the whole thing or let's rewrite the thing. And so in this case, actually, right, the first goal wasn't really to get off of Perl,
Hmm.
which, my engineering instinct is like, okay, well, let's rewrite it as something that you can find some talent that is more familiar with the
Right.
the tech stack. But it was just to understand what the thing was doing, where it was
Yeah.
touching its external dependencies, where it relied on this version of the environment like Apache or something. And so it was just even that kind of discovery, just like getting situational awareness on the system and then figuring out which of those specific things that I need to deal with in order to maybe get it running in a container or get it running in the cloud, or and so you sort of you do this stepwise, but again, it's so hard to know where to start sometimes when you're dealing with this big sort of archaeological project that
Yeah.
you aren't involved in all of those layers of tectonic,
Yeah.
decision
The,
making.
the
So
geologic strata that have
yeah.
accumulated atop it over the years. Yeah. Okay, so I get, Perl presents some maybe not unique challenges, but has some really interesting language features that subsequent languages have not always chosen to replicate or emulate. The laundry list of global variables, which are each updated in the background with the results of your latest regular expression match or what have you. Oh, and a particularly fun one that I learned about and was like, well, I should never use that. Is that your Perl function can detect whether it is being called in a context where it should return a scalar value or an array value. And so, like, try to imagine in Java a function that could have a totally different behavior if you're calling it inside of a collection, like if it's going to return a value into a
Yeah.
collection or not. Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
when are we going to have open rewrite Perl functionality, Sam?
probably never. I think that's one that in my 5 years here has been asked about 0 times, at least
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. I will say that this kind of modernization doesn't come up very often, right? Usually you're
Yeah.
dealing with something a little bit more normal. Tim, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, no, no. I'm just trying to think of the complexities of writing a parser and then modeling the aspects that they have, and then writing recipes to change the model of what you have with Perl. That's
I feel like
yeah,
I
I do
recall
really
seeing. I feel like I
yeah.
even recall seeing it like a blog post once talking about that, like parsing of Perl is undecidable, or rather that its grammar is sufficiently expressive or ambiguous that there are situations that don't resolve to a single canonical syntax tree
Oh,
representation, which I
wow.
think could present an issue for an open rewrite
Yeah.
parser. that would be different for us. Probably not a simple Antler grammar would cut it there. So yeah, sorry, we're not here to announce support for
Yeah.
Perl. If there's
No,
any
no Perl for
Perl
us.
diehards in the
For
chat,
those couple of folks, yeah.
all right.
But it's interesting,
So
like the process that we went through there, Sam, is sort of
mhm,
like you can sort of take that strategy, I feel like, regardless of the tech stack, right? Like a lot of
uh-huh.
the archaeology that we did by hand at that point, right? We're
Right,
looking
right.
at these Perl files and we're looking for patterns. We're looking for, where is it touching the file system? Where is it using those global variables? Where is
Hmm.
it using specific dependencies, maybe to talk to your database or whatever? And so it's like finding those specific, like, sort of linchpin areas that you need to spend your time thinking about, and you're not really necessarily like trying to diagram out the application architecture, right? There's a whole other layer of consultative stuff, right, Tim, that happens, like, how do I make this easier to manage? But just to understand where, like, the breaking points are, we can do the same thing on a Java app that's running in, you know a WebSphere or something, or Tomcat. We can do the same thing on code we wrote a week ago or a year ago, to sort of understand where is this going to break if I change some other dependency. If I move to the cloud and I'm not talking to an on-prem database anymore, I'm talking to an Amazon RDS thing. How do I find, like, if me as a developer who owns this app, do I have to think about that at all? Like, do I even use a database? I don't know.
So it sounds like we're laying out a prescription for modernization, that you're saying that kind of the first step is understand the interface between your program and any external systems it relies upon,
Mm.
other services, databases, file systems, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a great first rule. I think if you think about how your app sort of interfaces with the world around it, so that's
Hmm.
both the external systems, your databases, your other services, your authentication, authorization stuff,
Hmm.
but also the environment that it's running in. If we think about applications we shipped 15 years ago, a lot of times it's like you SSH'd into the server and you had a special directory where you had to upgrade all of the libraries that, like, the thing needed, but those libraries were also shared across some of the other apps that were installed in that server. And
No doubt, no
um,
doubt.
so really it's like, and so as I'm exploring tools like Open Rewrite to replicate some of these things that I had to do by hand, right? I had to go around and talk to teams, right? Interview them. Which, you know, does your app look like this or like that? Is it a thing that's reading messages off of a queue and publishing data, or is it a thing that is running batch jobs and producing reports, or is it a
Hmm.
thing that just exposes APIs and doesn't have any sort of state. Like I'm looking for those patterns, but all of a sudden we can use. I think you guys, showed the data tables functionality
Yep.
in Open Rewrite a couple of weeks ago, and I'm finding this like 1-2 tap of having access to a whole code base and to be able to look for patterns that I maybe missed when I talked to a team. That team wasn't even the decision maker for this app, right? They inherited it, but they didn't decide to read off of the IBM MQQ and do this thing and that thing. And so this like ability to do the archaeology in a repeatable way, in a way that's
Yeah.
consistent, is a really powerful first step to finding all of those little like places where my application maybe isn't going to run in AWS, or maybe it's not going to run in Kubernetes, or wherever
Yeah.
your thing is that you're trying to go for.
Yeah. This does sound like a good prompt, Tim. Maybe for us to quickly show the new Dev Center and maybe I don't know, maybe even a search recipe. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. You wanna drive that one, or
Uh,
yeah?
I was hoping you would, but I can do it. Let's see.
Putting Tim and Sam on the spot.
Uh, just wasn't. Yeah, as you were talking, I was like, oh, this is like perfect
Hmm.
setup for mentioning the Dev Center. Yeah, I haven't shared the screen on. This was mentioned earlier. New.
On your new computer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's
I
see.
think as you're getting set up there, like I think one of the things in my personal backlog, right, is to start looking for and building out these recipes that sort of replicate the kinds of things that I've searched for in the past, right? Some sort of out of the box things that sort of find these linchpin points in apps. And I think this is a really fun way to do it without having to do all of the legwork.
Totally, totally, and yeah, so I could easily imagine how your process of potentially going and like filling out a spreadsheet of just like what are all of the versions we are using of the current thing, or
Yep.
what are all of our relationships to a particular dependency or to the file system, could be substantially simplified by having. I don't even have a system for opening spreadsheets installed on this computer yet, but
I love
we
that.
can all look at a CSV file and interpret that. That counts as human readable, right? Uh, could really simplify the legwork of getting set up to attempt a major
Hmm.
migration like this. So did you have was that literally what you would do? You'd kind of like go through and make a spreadsheet of like here's the status of where we're at currently. To like did you project manage these efforts?
Um, I did to some capacity. Like one of the roles that I found myself in was often this sort of like portfolio level thinking.
Hmm.
So if you think about this, we showed this like funny. We talked a little bit about the strata.
Hmm.
Let me see if I can share my screen. I have one slide that maybe. Let's see. Share. Maybe not. Anyway, I had really it was an illustration of like that sort of geological slice where you have like your different kinds of rock and all this stuff. But if you think about an organization, it's not really just one application. We were just talking about this Perl thing, right?
Hmm.
So you have this level of modernization, but you also have the sense of like an enterprise that has grown up over the years. You have these almost like time layers, like rings on a tree. So not every application is totally random either, right? It's sort of a function of the time that it was built, right? You have the period where we were all building these big data apps. So you have like Hadoop things all littered through stuff. You have the period, of the first round of WebSphere stuff, and then you could never upgrade it, so it's the old WebSphere, and then you have the new layer that sits on top of it. It's a new WebSphere. You have the low code period where you had all these vendors with like little
Yeah.
visual drag and drop things. And so if you think about those as layers of your organization's like engineering practice, not just one or two apps, but the whole portfolio, the whole ecosystem.
Hmm.
One of the things that that next layer of sort of crippling decision making is like, where do I even start
Hmm.
across 1,000 apps or 10,000 apps or whatever?
Hmm.
And then you add to the complexity that most of these apps are talking to each other. So you can't even move just one or two. You can't just
Hmm.
fix just one or two. You have to sort of think about them as constellations. And so there's all these dimensions, right? And so you mentioned project managing. I like to think about it more like strategizing early on in that
Sure.
process and throughout the work of it. It's like, how do I help teams know what patterns exist? What problems even do they need to solve? And then I'd argue like even like once you solve it, how do you get the most bang for your buck for solving that, right? So if you've gotten somebody off of WebSphere and they did this thing, how do you make sure that all the other teams that are struggling with the same challenge get
Hmm.
the value of doing that? They don't have to do all of the work of solving that from the beginning.
Hmm.
And so in my past lives, it was documentation, it was providing enablement team, sort of internal consultancy, things like that.
Yeah. Hey, everyone, do this. Hey, everyone, attend
Yep.
our workshop and learn how to
Yep.
modernize your own application. Yeah.
Yep. And so, but now, I see the next layer of that archaeology with Open Rewrite is using recipes that sort of let you capture the learning from the first set of teams, right? And sort of build up and then how do I roll that out to teams so they can do stuff consistently? And so in this case, it might be, I'm trying to figure out how to get off of. I worked with a team that was trying to get off of like a vendor's ETL process, like a low code thing, where they had all these XML files that described these proprietary data flows.
Pipelines and
Yep.
translate them into something else.
Yep. And so they were like, okay, we don't want to be in this like walled garden anymore. We want to start figuring out how we're going to refactor those and have our own services start to coordinate, orchestrate the data. And
Right.
so again, we went through that archaeology. We went to say, okay, well, which pieces of this vendor are you using? Which of those little like widgets do you have in your little visual flows? And then we could find the ones that were most used, the ones that are really common. And then we could also identify once we had figured out how to migrate a couple of them, here's a whole set of other teams that only use those ones you have answers for, right? So you could
Hmm.
then go to them and say, hey, we have an answer, we can help you get off. So
Yeah.
now, it's as you build up that set of recipes that tell me how do I translate this little bit of XML into this little bit of Java or whatever
Hmm.
the case might be.
One
How do
thing
I
some of
scale
our
that?
current customers have seen success with on these kind of like cross organization efforts is to do what I might describe as like a breadth first migration
Yeah,
rather than a
this
depth
is great.
first migration. Kind of like
Yep.
maybe the old way of doing it or the way that an individual team might approach a migration is like, well, for our application, we're going to do all of the steps of the migration. We're going to get on the newer version of Gradle and then the newer version of Java, and then we can upgrade Spring Boot, and then we can upgrade this other thing, and just do all of
Yep.
those steps for their application, and then maybe move on to the next application, so that you have one application that's fully migrated and 99 that are still at the starting line, and so what we've seen. Recipes and automation be really good at facilitating is doing more of a breadth first migration, and this is something that I know it worked well at Shelter Insurance, was to be like, okay, well, let's focus on raising the baseline for each of these. Like, we
Yep.
start off, we've got a range of Gradle versions in play. Let's get every repository using the migration recipes to a version of Gradle that will support the version of Java that will support Spring Boot 3, right? And
Yep.
then once they got everyone on that baseline, up the baseline for the next thing in the tech stack, and that allows you to proceed very incrementally and to be
Hmm.
making consistent progress across the entire organization,
Yep.
rather than leaving to have some people frantically trying to migrate everything and some people being like, yeah, we haven't even started at all. I don't know. They'll hassle
Yep.
us about it eventually,
I was
maybe.
saying two
Yeah.
years, maybe it's our turn. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it also gives you a very focused troubleshooting. Like if there's any issues
Yes.
upgrading your Gradle,
Yeah.
you can just focus on today is going to be doing the Gradle upgrades. And you don't have to look mentally keep in mind, oh yeah, I read all the upgrade guides for all the Spring Boot versions and all the Gradle versions and all the Java
Limited
versions and all the
context windows isn't
libraries.
just a thing for LLMs, it's also a thing
Ah,
for people.
no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, what you're talking about, Matt, also reminds me of a major migration that I was part of at Tableau Software when I was on the server administration team, and that particular piece of software had a history of being a Ruby on Rails application, and it got moved over to Java when they were like, okay, our team is like 200 people. This like untyped, like, or dynamically typed scripting language is just it's unmanageable. We got to go to something with a little bit more structure, a few more strictures to it. So they moved the main application over to Java, but there were still vestiges of the Ruby on Rails thing, particularly when it came to configuring the server, right? And configuring how the Java components would run and how they would relate to each other. There was still like a Ruby on Rails control plane, and that was also slated to be migrated after in due course. And that migration, they were like, okay, well, we're going to do this clever thing. We're going to make it like a distributed system and have different like components for each of these different pieces of functionality, and that'll allow us to to scale it for very large installations, and with an eye towards running, doing Tableau Online like a cloud service, providing Tableau Server as a cloud service. Set the things that need to horizontally scale can scale. A lot of very good and sensible objectives, but it was just a lot to bite off all at once. And so that project took a long time. It got there eventually, but it took a long time, and so there was this really awkward period that you often get in major migration, particularly in major rewrites, where I guess not so much a migration, a regular migration, but definitely in a rewrite situation where like the old thing and the new thing are kind of racing, because the business still runs on the old thing, and you can't stop. You can't just like be like, oh, it doesn't work for this customer. Well, too bad. They'll be able to switch to the new thing in 2 years. Like that answer isn't going to cut it. So the old thing still keeps receiving work, and the new thing is rushing to catch up, and maybe it ever overtakes it, or maybe it never does. I feel like there's plenty of efforts to replace the old thing where the old thing wins that race.
Yeah.
But there was a suggestion early on that like, okay, well, let's try to do this in a way where we can do incremental switchover. Let's put like something like a load balancer in front, and as we implement new functionality in the new management system, it'll just route from the UI to the new Java backend. And if it doesn't, if it isn't implemented yet, it'll route to the old Ruby on Rails stuff. But the senior engineers in the team decided, which I was at this time, I was not one of the senior engineers in that team, so I wasn't in the room for this conversation. But apparently it involved someone storming out and flatly refusing to do this, and I wish I knew why, because I feel like that idea was sensible. I feel like that probably would have saved heartache. Now, there's surely like architectural reasons that would be very difficult, of like, well, the old system has a database over here and the new system has a database over here, and they're not the same schema. So like, what does it mean if you route this request here and that request over there? Like,
a lot of times it feels like there's not this
room where it happened. The room
I love
where it happened. A reference to the Hamilton musical there.
I love that.
It's a good song.
It's a common wrestling point, though, right, Sam? Like, you're talking about adding more complexity.
Absolutely, it would have absolutely been more complexity.
This. And so I think the strategy that you've mentioned already, this idea that if you flip this thing on its head and say, what's the fastest way that I can get a little value and spend as little time managing this diverging time streams of engineering work, like that's the better like outcome for everyone involved, right? And so I find that it comes usually to like learning, right? I'm afraid to roll something out to 1,000 apps. One, because it might be very difficult, like just the logistics of getting that done, coordinating all those people, but also like, how do I know that things are going to work? Like, until I've gotten all the way through that first app, I'm not sure if I've learned all the things that are important, right? And I think that flipping the script, like you mentioned, is a way to just remind ourselves, like, that context window needs to be small. The outcomes need to be the thing that's immediately in reach. And you get a lot of this value just not being on the old stuff, not being in the middle of a giant change.
Yeah. It's like, even if you're not on, Spring Boot 3 yet, well, you've already upgraded your version of Gradle, and you've already updated your version of Java. So like, you're getting value from those upgrades right now while the next steps proceed. say anywhere you can turn an all or nothing approach into
Hmm.
something that is that is providing value incrementally, I think is really valuable for project management and for just almost the success of like any human endeavor. This is something I think about when doing like painting or drawing too, of like the the correct way to paint, as I see it, is recursively. You start off with a big brush, so low detail, and you fill in big blocks of color. And then once you have it, things looking good at that level of
Yeah, I can see
resolution,
that.
you shrink your brush and then you fill things in at that level of detail. And so what you get essentially is very quickly a minimum viable product where you would have a finished painting pretty early on, zoomed out, right? And
Yep.
so you keep refining, adding more detail and focusing in, so that you can achieve the level of detail you want at the size of painting you want.
Hmm.
And that helps you to avoid both structural mistakes in your painting because you have the whole structure there from the beginning.
Hmm.
If you get bored, well, you can just be like, well, I'm done now. At least the kind of central focal piece looks pretty good. The background's still all blurry, but
Yep.
whatever. That's not the point. I made the things that needed the detail have it, so
Hmm.
we can cut a release right now.
Yep.
And I think that works well for software, for
Yep.
almost for almost anything. Get the structural stuff in place early, and then make as much as possible optional.
Yep. And I think we do that sort of all the time when we start to make decisions about like how much work do I put into modernizing a particular app. If we think
Yeah,
about a company with 1,000 apps, right? They've acquired companies and they've got
yeah,
different tech stacks and things like that. Not every one of those applications is equally important, right?
sure,
They all do a job, but not every one of them warrants the same amount of like engineering investment to maybe to rewrite the whole thing in a beautiful, new front end
right.
technology or, um, and so I think there's this spectrum where you do still need to be able to get the value, that
Mm-hmm.
baseline value, the structural value you're talking about, Sam. Like
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be secure, it needs to be manageable and maintainable, it needs to be understandable, but maybe it doesn't need to be constantly played with.
Yeah,
And so there's this whole range of activities, and then you get to decide. You as the team who knows that app best, or you as the business who knows where you're going next. You have, a lot of opportunities to not get sunk by a particular app that really is never going to pay its investment back.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's true, and that could be a challenge for modernization efforts from the beginning, or a challenge with getting them started at all. Because it's like, wait, okay, it's going to take how much money and how long to get the exact same
Yep.
application we have today, but with less risk in certain areas,
Hmm.
perhaps. So that can be a hard
Hmm.
sell until it's a crisis, and then if you wait for it to be a
Yep.
crisis of like, oh no, we're several major versions behind, and security, like there's no longer supporting security or issuing patches for the system that our business is predicated on. Now it's very urgent, and now it's too late to do
Hmm.
things incrementally, right? It's
Yep.
easier to stay up to date when you're almost up to date. So this kind of process of like recursively raise your baseline, right? Of across your whole
Hmm.
organization, try to get the version of one of the tools you use up to latest, or at least up to closer to where you want to be. And if you're kind of always on that treadmill, well, you naturally get fitter. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I want to sort of circle back around to one of the things you said earlier, Sam, is sort of like to bring the whole story back
Hmm.
to completion. Right?
Hmm.
You mentioned like is the thing that I start with doing looking for those environment touch points, right?
Hmm.
And so I think the story here, the overall motion is you're always going to start with, understand, find, and extract the patterns that are useful across my application, and ideally across all of the applications in my team or my organization. And then you sort of need to understand how important this application is. Like, what's my goal, right? Am I just trying to stay up to date so that I'm not vulnerable to the latest dependency? Am I trying to make it easy for my teams to ship features and on a, the same or a different framework, all that stuff. And so that's going to help tell you what things you're going to do. And then you're going to use that to like do what you're mentioning here, incrementally work your way from what you learned, the patterns that you learned, right? And then you're going to look for ways to capture, this is how I dealt with that pattern. This thing
Hmm.
was sort of hairy at one point, but I'm not solving it just for me. I'm solving it for the whole organization. And then you basically pave out those things to get the value as quickly as possible. So I think
And
that
feeding those learnings back into recipes
yeah,
is a great way to
it's
scale
magical,
those
man.
learnings.
I wish I
Yeah.
was doing this all along. It's like being able to take what the guy next to you or the girl next to you has learned and not have to relearn that myself,
Right.
right? And to be able to use this little program to basically explain what needs to happen, right? I mean, we've
Hmm.
all looked at Spring migration guides or how to upgrade the
Hmm.
latest, front end framework or something. And there's just this wall of steps. And I probably
Yeah.
miss stuff. I know I miss stuff, right? But like to be able to codify that is a really, really
Yeah.
magical thing.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's incomplete, right? Because it's not gonna, even if it's like these are all the steps you need for like Spring, it's not all
Yep.
the steps you need for that library that you also depend upon that also
Yep.
needs to be upgraded, or like, oh, the Spring version brings a JUnit upgrade with it, or a Makito upgrade with it, or what have you. So like, go check out those migration guides too. And obviously, a migration guide is the things that the authors remembered to mention. But
Yep.
I got to say that as a software developer, the state I keep in my head of the software is what's on head. What's the status of the
Yep.
latest commit? Like, wait, you mean I have to think about what changed since the last major version? That was months ago, or however long. I don't
Yep.
I don't remember what state the software used to be in. So I think you often find, except in the most disciplined or regimented of organizations with that there's a recency bias in even the
Oh,
migration guides
absolutely.
to the features that were worked on close to the end of that new version.
Yep.
Yeah. How about you, Tim? Do you have
Cool.
any good horror stories of doing migrations or modernization efforts from your consulting life?
Yeah, well, like to like what Matt also said, it's like initially you have a lot of trouble even understanding what is out there. And
Hmm.
one thing I used to do, like I'm switching companies about every year as a consultant, was so I would start with building like an architecture diagram, but
Yeah.
not building one big diagram across everything at first, but building just a small diagram in each repository of what are the inputs and what are the outputs. And that can be calling a service, calling a database,
Yep.
posting to a topic, or contributing to a topic.
Hmm.
And then if you have that on the local scale, it's already valuable for that service, giving you a bit of context. If you aggregate them all together, automated, then you have something that shows how big of a mess you're actually dealing with. And
Yeah.
having a
Yep.
deliberately messy diagram kind of helps bring focus to
Could
okay,
drive
we're
the drive
gonna
the point home.
yeah,
Yeah.
this looks terrible, but it is reflective of what we have. So
Yeah.
now
Okay.
let's
What you're
I was
saying
always
is
a fan of
reminding me of what
sticky
one of
notes.
our customers did, where they used it was it was an engineer at one of our customers who they were told by their management, like, hey, you're responsible for these like 40 legacy repositories. The people who worked on these are long gone from the company, but they're still in production. They're not
Yep.
receiving a lot of changes, but they need security patches. They need to a bug
mhm.
fixed every now and then. And so it's yours now. Enjoy, with whatever documentation, if any, exists. And so they were like, okay, well, we've got this Moderne thing. Let's run the find call graph recipe to produce a data table that has, at a very fine
Hmm.
granularity, every method, and what methods are called from it. And they dumped that into a vector database to make a custom code search tool where they could be like, okay, I've got a stack trace here. I've got a frame or just like a function I have a question about. I can find everything that calls into this function and everything called from this function, not just in one repository, but
Hmm.
across all 40 of those repositories, so that even without, like reading the code or knowing anything about what it does, that is immediately the input you need to like start reasoning about, like, well, if I'm looking at this layer, what are the potential sources of a problem coming in?
Yep.
If I'm making a change, what are the possible consequences
Hmm.
of that change? Things I would need to test or
Yep.
consider or think about. And yeah, I thought that was a really cool idea, and wonder if we could probably do some more to like productize
Yeah.
that, or make like build a nice visualization for that into the Moderne SaaS.
I feel
And
like
it's
it's always
especially,
surprising.
yeah,
Oh,
good.
sorry, Tim. I think the thing you're talking about, Sam, like half the time people don't know who their internal
Customers are,
consumers are, customers
yeah.
are, right? And so you get this weird thing where it's like, well, I have this API and I don't know if I'm like who's calling it. And so
Hmm.
am I allowed to evolve it, right? And so the things you're
Yeah,
talking about now you start to move into even older things like remote procedure calls or
yeah,
everybody depending on a stored procedure that is stored in your Oracle database. And so I
yeah.
don't know who's calling that stored procedure. Like there's all these like permutations of just, am I allowed to change this or what's going to happen when I change this? That
Hmm.
like you can answer when you can look at the code across, all of these things. It's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So let's see.
and
I think
much
we're
like
good.
your migration guides, you can hide that information on a wiki somewhere, but it's much better to have a platform that's just up to date and gives you the answer in the moment.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Wikis and comments get out of date quickly and can then be a
Yeah.
source of confusion rather than a source of clarity. I think it is. That's part of why for like our recipes, our recipe catalog, we regenerate the documentation based upon metadata in the code, so that it can't
It's
be any
close.
more it can't
Yeah.
be any more out of date than the metadata in the code is.
Yeah.
That helps. That helps a lot. Although obviously that strategy isn't applicable to everything. Okay, I feel like we're kind of coming up on time here. Any Matt? Is there anything I should have? Did you have a cool story or observation that you haven't gotten to share yet that you would like to in these?
Oh, I think the thing that has guided me most through this kind of work, because every situation is a little different,
Mhm.
but this idea of looking for patterns for archetypes, like for pulling yourself up a layer and figuring out how to solve this problem, and then also share that solution with the people around you in your org is like the most valuable way to get unstuck in any of this work, right? So if we just separated out the recipe writing or the implementation details of that, it could be working with your communities of practice within your org or sharing cross team pollination. It could be ways that you inner source stuff, right? Hey, where do I provide these solutions as reusable libraries? It could be writing recipes, right, that help make it available to other folks. But I feel like looking for ways to not just think about your code or like you said, Sam, like the head of the what am I
Mhm.
being asked to do or working on right this minute. It's like looking for these like sort of archaeological patterns across all of your engineering organization is like a really it's fascinating. Maybe not fascinating to everybody. It's fascinating to me to see how things evolved in these ways and how your organization ties in. And then it's just a really powerful starter for any of this work,
Mhm.
being able to understand, be able to find those little clusters of like-minded code and then
Mhm.
figure out how do I actually solve a problem that's like really valuable, right? I
Mhm.
answered this and 20 teams or 100 teams or 1,000 teams got value out of it. That's like the magic that can really sort of help keep you moving through this. So
Yeah, yeah. Finding those wins is as you go along. I think is important for being able to show progress to
yeah,
stakeholders,
yeah,
including yourself. Right? If you're not
yeah.
if you're not notching small wins under your belt, it just feels like a
It's
slog. You kind of
exhausting. Yeah.
it's exhausting. You kind of need that dopamine hit of like I
Yeah.
accomplished something, not the whole thing, but an incremental step
Yeah.
towards the whole thing. There's a Arnold Schwarzenegger had a great quote that I don't remember off the top of my head, but he got when he came to America, he created a bricklaying business, and he had some great quote that I should have looked up in advance, but I didn't think I would be putting myself
That's
on the
our
spot to
homework. We can
recite
all
it
go
about
find.
like if you focus on laying every brick carefully, after some amount of time, you'll look back and be like, wow, look at all that I've accomplished. But if you focus on like creating a grand castle from the beginning, you'll just never ever get there.
Yeah, I
Um,
can see that.
yeah.
I
Anyway,
love it.
yeah. So I don't know. Any final remarks from you, Tim?
No, not really. No. That's,
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching another edition of Code Remix Weekly. I will be back here next week with neither of these other people. So appreciate them while you can. If you didn't get enough Matt, try rewinding the stream and watching it again.
You'll
Thanks,
be in
folks.
good company, and others can join me at DevX Belgium or any of the other events that are coming up.
Uh,
Hope to
yeah,
see you there.
Belgium's lovely. It is. If you haven't been there, it's fun to go.
Absolutely.
Not as nice
Jealous.
as the Netherlands, of course, Tim. I know that there's a bit of a sibling rivalry there. So
Yeah,
we
it's
all
like
we all like the Netherlands better than Belgium, but it's pretty good too.
they have more charm, I think, than the Netherlands. But, we'll see.
That's very diplomatic of you. Probably good not to want to cause an international incident. Get Belgium all riled up against you right before you visit. Smart. You can share your true feelings about Belgium when you get back.
All good, all good.
Uh,
Thanks, folks. And
yeah.
yeah, see you next week.
See y'all next
Cheers.
week. Bye.
Hey, thanks, folks.